responded to a 911 hang-up.
Hi! What? Come here.
The situation quickly spiraled out of control, prompting officers from all over to provide backup. We'll take a close look at how the police deal with a barricaded suspect who has lost all reason and answer the age-old question. What's hotter, scorching Pringles or pepper spray?
Is it hot?
On June 18th, 2022 at approximately 2:11 p.m., an officer with the Dunn County Sheriff's Office, accompanied by a civilian ride-along, arrived at the rural residence of a 911 hang-up call. The officer intended to investigate, but what happened next caught everyone off guard.
Hey, good morning. Instead of making a second coffee, we went with a green tea with extra lemon. Yes, cheers.
Hi! What? Come here. On your
Cheers.
knees now! No. Come here.
It's lemon seeds. I put extra lemon in my green tea. Yes, good morning. You're welcome. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're watching that. Midwest Safety Channel. It was a 911 hang up. They showed up and he started running from him.
At this point, the officer deployed pepper spray. However, it seemed to have more impact on the officer than it did the suspect.
You two stand from my car. Get in the car. Cover the east side. Adult male. What's up? You got a guy upstairs? Yeah. What do you do, Kyle? Take a minute. Do it for yourself. What happened? Show up. Yeah. Let me get Ranger. What did he do? Let me get. Hold on. Just regroup. Just regroup. What happened? You want to rail upstairs? No idea. I got residual. Okay. We're getting the OC spray. One be upstairs. Let me grab Ranger.
Come down here now!
K9! Come down.
K9 is coming in! Sheriff's office!
Is there any firearms in the house? Any guns in the house?
Just like this all this chaos and this old lady comes walking out. I'm like, what's going on?
What's going on? Apparently there's a fight here. Who called you? There was a 911 call from this residence. Who's the male that went upstairs? Anthony something? Is Anthony around here? Watch out. Okay.
It looked like that's what she was about to say.
Anthony, time to come out.
Hey man, could you come out on this?
Come on out here.
What's he supposed to do?
Come on out here. Well, he just fought with an officer, so we got a problem.
Why don't we just have a seat right over there?
We got a problem.
He's still on a no contact here.
A no-contact order is a court order issued by a judge prohibiting an individual from having contact with another and is enforceable by law. The terms of a no-contact order can vary widely depending on the circumstances and the judge who issued it. Violating such an order usually results in fines, misdemeanor, or felony charges, and even jail time.
I imagine. He's way high and way to go. In guns, knives. Dragon. Wagon. I'll take a sneak card.
Anthony, Sheriff's Office, K9 is in the house. You're gonna get hit.
K9 is in the house.
Come down here with your hands up now. Is that the only way to be upstairs?
2:30, we have a whole coverage for the house.
Jeez.
Here.
Okay. How many people are in the house?
Still 3 people in here. Well,
Yeah.
3 normally.
yeah.
Somebody else is here.
Sheriff's Office, all occupants of the house. Step out here now with your hands up.
Oh, we'll explain it to you, but have a seat right here, okay?
Still good in my one, so today I should do those
You
now.
see her come out now with your hands in the air. Or else in the door and run back.
We have the northeast cover.
Dog coming.
I have a northeast right here.
Sheriff's Office, step to the back door now.
Yeah, that's my card.
Come down the steps now with your hands up. All occupants, come down.
Get the fuck out of here.
Hey Kevin, come on over here and tell them what time it is.
And to replace it with the truth. From the misguided hype around socialism to the West's inevitable decline, no stone is left unturned. Are you ready to face the truth? Most people are too terrified to admit.
In addition to those sentiments, I asked the following. I thought conservatism, as certainly reflected by Ronald Reagan, was for less government, balanced budgets. Although the last president to give us a balanced budget was Bill Clinton, I think. Balanced budget, low deficit, as a percentage of GDP, to draw down the debt, and to make sure that defense was well funded. That doesn't seem to be Donald Trump.
Well, the defense well funded is.
No, I don't mean just about defense. I mean the cross the board of those issues having to do with deficit and debt and also respect for institutions.
Yes, well, the respect for institutions presents a very big problem for the right, because many of the institutions, one thinks of higher education, have become so deranged that many people on the right have simply decided to give up on them. You've got to do something completely different. That may be a valid response or not, but at some point, my belief, and I've said this many times, is that the job of a conservative is, if an institution goes rotten, is to rebuild the institution and to save it, not to simply have the instinct to burn it down. On the issue of the budget, yes, watching the debt ceiling being, raised again and again, this is going to be a big problem, and maybe it has been a big problem since 2008. or the right, which is that problem of, I mean, Reagan could presume that people understood that capitalism worked. I think after 2008, many people, partly as a result of quantitative easing and much more the printing of money, basically decided that capitalism wasn't working for them in the way they thought it would.
With how deranged the education system has become with the pronouns and propaganda and whatnot, I don't think the right can be blamed for giving up on it. However, it most certainly becomes a problem when that hopelessness causes people on the right to think there's no hope to make it better, because if you don't do that, then who will?
And if you can't accrue capital, there's no inevitability that you'll become a capitalist. So I think that a lot of what would be conservative economic views have people have lost faith in them, including on the right. I think this is a shame. I think there's still a very, very good argument to be made for a balanced budget, for not making reckless spending commitments.
And they have no real appreciation or support for tariffs either.
Well, that's right, absolutely. That would have been, Reagan would have been bemused by the current fight list. But again, the situation has changed. I mean, once China entered the WTO, the rules did change. I mean, America was being undercut. The American worker was being cheated. And China was both a member of the club and breaking the rules. So that's where the Conservative has a problem, which is we want to preserve the things we have, but the rules have changed, and that's where you have to adapt. But you have to adapt in such a way that you don't burn down what is good.
You wrote a column about the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York, who is a socialist. Do you think in America there is any appetite for socialism?
And there obviously is.
In New York City?
In New York City. Not in if Zohran Mamdani wins the mayoral race in New York, the Republicans should open bottles of champagne, because they will get a clean sweep of everything afterwards. They will be able...
If in fact there is some indication that the Republicans may be in trouble leading into the midterm elections, a Mamdani election as mayor of New York would give the Republicans enough firepower.
So if it's a club, who's in charge?
Well, me and you and millions of other members. We give them feedback and they make it happen.
So I'm like a boss.
Co-boss.
Co-boss. Co-boss.
Co-boss.
All members are bosses.
Come join us. Sam's.
Jack Reacher. Where is the job that I inherit? Give it to you because you couldn't step on the truck. I have no idea what you're talking about. Do you think we're stupid?
Yes.
Show me what you have. Your sister's involved in something big enough that the federal government's worried and people are trying to work
Lorry
with
and
them on the street.
Associates really get all of those clients, all of those big settlements?
I'm gonna know whether you can take
Yes, we do. And you know what else is true? I really am standing on top of this big rock.
You were in the wrong place.
To resist that in your judgment. It's ironic, isn't it, that the same people who have achieved everything they've wanted because of capitalism are now voting for someone who firmly stands against it. That's like saying we want to ban oxygen. People are now so caught up in wanting to be a part of change that they never stop once to think about whether or not that change is actually good.
They'll be able to point to him endlessly.
That's it.
The failure of his promises, the failure of his policies, he won't be able to institute much of it. What he does do will be a disaster. I think it will be an enormous boon to the Republican Party. But on the question of socialism in America, you know, I genuinely think that one of the odd things, it goes back to your list of things in the 21st century, one of the odd things is we aren't as inoculated as we thought we were to certain political viruses. And my friends in Eastern and Central Europe, for instance, that are my age and indeed younger, and certainly older, cannot believe that somebody would be arguing for socialism in New York City. They're amazed by it. But I have to say to them, look, Americans have not been inoculated to this to the extent that we expected. You may have been in Poland, you may have been in other countries, but they have not been. We have not been in America.
You have also argued that Europe is in decline.
Well, that's unarguable. That's just an observation.
Well, okay. And what is rising in its place? I mean, is it simply the rise of autocracy?
I'm 11 years old.
No, I think it's just decline. Unless
culturally and otherwise.
Well, I mean, Angela Merkel said in, I think, 2010, she made a very pertinent observation, which, like most pertinent observations made by politicians, led to nothing. She said, we in Europe have, this were the figures then, 12.5% of the world's population, 25% of global GDP, and 50%, 50% of global welfare spending. She said, in other words, something is going to have to change radically if we want to maintain the lifestyle that we've become accustomed to. And in the 15 years since she said that, nothing has changed meaningfully in Europe. The welfare commitments remain wildly high, the demographics remain unbelievably challenging, and you can feel it. There's some countries in Europe, you can see how they can turn around. You can feel in the air, everywhere from Britain to much of Eastern Europe, you can feel this. It's rather like, I described it in The Spectator a while ago, as, you know, it's always said that if a man or a woman makes a huge fortune, and their children will rarely be able to pick up the mantle or continue the company. By the time that you are their grandchildren, they're studying interpretive dance at Berkeley, and by the fourth generation, you're back to poverty again. There's something like that feeling in Europe that we're on the third generation somehow, that we're spending down what has been accrued culturally, socially, philosophically, as well as economically. And that a lot of people have just decided, I hope it lasts. Remember that great line of Larkin's, I thought it would last my time at least.
Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. And right now, Europe is in the third stage, where life for a lot of people has become so easy that they simply lack the strength to uphold the good times for another generation. And before long, the decline will catch up to the European democracies.
But at the same time, I also remember that before Trump, there was Brexit. Now, people point to the rise of the right in France, and they define those right positions in many cases as autocracies.
I don't define them as autocracies. I think there are Europe
in France.
No, I mean, I don't think that the national rally is autocratic. I mean, even if you take the case of Orban in Hungary, I mean, you know, there are going to be elections in Hungary next year, and it's perfectly possible he will lose them.
But people, let me just interrupt. If people would define, tenets of autocracy, in his case, as how he's treated the media. And other factors.
Yes, I mean, there is always a hilarity of some of the Western critiques of Orban, indeed the Polish party that just lost government last year. There's one in particular that amuses me, which is not just the claims that there's media bias and much more, but in particular the issue of the judiciary. This comes up in Israel as well. American politicians will call their counterparts in Jerusalem and Budapest and berate them for the politicization of the judiciary in their countries, and you want to say, could you tell us how you do it in America, and whether there's any political involvement in this? I'm not by any means saying that anything goes, but there are some legitimate criticisms in these countries and some illegitimate ones. With Europe, it'll come down to a very, very basic thing, which is, can real nativist bigotry of the far right be kept out, and can legitimate public grievance that is often called far right be permitted? And
what are examples of both?
For instance, if you're concerned about mass immigration, you should not be deemed to be far right automatically, any more than you would say that somebody who called for social justice should automatically be called a communist. You know, we should have some hygiene in our language. And I believe that the problem in Europe is, and I've thought about this, traveled extensively to look at this over the years. The problem is that every European country is its own special minefield, and the extent to which this is the case cannot be overstated. Every country after the 20th century in Europe has a type of political trauma, and we are understandably very, very fearful of the return of anything that looks like National Socialism. And we have early warning detectors in our society. I would argue that those early warning detectors are set in such a way that the tripwire goes off slightly earlier than it should do, and ends up accusing people who shouldn't be accused of things they're not guilty of. At the same time, it's understandable. I was recently in Germany, the week before last. Constant negotiation, discussion about the alternative for Deutschland Party. And there is going to be, again, a real problem in the 21st century with this. But if you talk about the real far right, real autocracy in Europe, there is general mainstream loathing of it. But in response to some things that have happened in recent decades, it has been politically expedient for parts of the political mainstream to call people far right who are not. And I have no doubt, and I've said this many times, that
you cannot put people into distinct, neat categories, and most certainly not by judging them based on one or two opinions they have. Someone can be on the left and still recognise the damage unchecked mass immigration has done to their country, and similarly, someone can be on the right and still care about social justice. It's important to not accuse people of things they're not guilty of.
Whilst there will be far-right people in Alternative for Deutschland, I don't see that in its mainstream leadership like Alice Weidel. I don't see the right-wing parties in Scandinavia as being Nazis in waiting. But it's to use a phrase I've often used, this stuff requires political brain surgery, and you require somebody with a scalpel and an extremely steady hand to draw them. And unfortunately, in the media and in politics, this operation is being performed by people wearing boxing gloves.
Great coverage, great
Looking at the division in America, what's the best way to bring it to problem solving?
I think in other countries which have been politically divided in democracies, I've very rarely seen it as badly divided as it has been in America in recent years. I think Britain after the Brexit vote is a comparable one. But I suppose I would say that the most important thing is to find things of agreement. Find things to agree on. And
what might they be?
Well, they might be very basic things. For instance, I think it's deranged of the sections of the radical left to keep negatively rewriting the American story. In other words, to rewrite it in an entirely accusatory, guilt-ridden way. I think that's madness, and I think that the people who've done that have very largely done it precisely in order to cause division. But there might just be things you agree on. What your role is as a country, and I don't mean in on the world stage, but for instance, has America been a force for good? I would say that if the divide, if America were divided between a left who thought it hadn't been a force for good and a right who believed it had been, and they exacerbated each other's tensions, you could have no national unity. But if you could just come to an agreement that, broadly speaking, again, the same thing with Britain, broadly speaking, we've had our mistakes, we've had terrible things that have happened in the past, like every country, we have our history, but that, broadly speaking, we've been a force for good in the world. That would mean that every other debate, disagreement, would be more easily addressable. It's very basic, but it's rather like that thing of, if you want to find agreement in a marriage or a relationship, you've got to find the things you agree on. And
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Yes, but one thing would be, do we want this to continue in its recognizable form? I mean, that's a very basic and deep one, but one of the
want America to continue in its recognizable form?
Yes, I mean, one of the horrors of recent years to me in America, I wrote about this in the War on the West, has been seeing the American past ransacked in such a negative light. And, for instance, one of the things you can always tell today is if you go to an institution set up to tell the American story, it will be very considerably portrayed in a negative light.
We have a stowaway. Come back, everybody.
I'll take that as a victory. That was a close
People
one.
need to realise that just because you're guilty of something in the past does not mean you have no hope for the future. And this applies on a broader stage to countries as well. You cannot ignore the overwhelming good a country has done for the world simply because a few individuals from the countries who lived decades or centuries ago committed some of the worst atrocities of human history.
I find institutional...
But as soon as you say that, I mean, I think of all the stories of America in a positive light.
You do. But the question of whether a generation coming up has been taught the same thing is a very serious one. I don't see, in the campus radicalism on the United States, I don't see the level of gratitude and reverence for the institutions that there should be. I see seething, fermenting revolutionaryism and anti-Americanism running rife. And it's largely because they're taught it. I said in On Democracies and Death Cults, I quoted a student at Columbia. It was so sad to me that he said this. He said, he was involved in the encampments, and he said, I'm a first generation of my family to come to the university. And when I got here, I was taught the rich history of protest that existed here, and I decided that I wanted to be part of it. And what I'm saying is, imagine what it is like. Imagine how different it would be if, when somebody has the great good fortune to go up to university, to an American university like Columbia, they learn the great things and ideas and people that have come from it, and learn how lucky they are to have their place in that story. This is a change of mindset, which is just necessary to do, because otherwise we're teaching people into a radicalism and a hatred which no good can come from.
As long as, I would add this caveat, as long as to talk about reform, to talk about positive change,
yes,
and positive evolution, is not considered to be anti-American or anti-Israel or anti-Europe.
Yes.
We have to figure out, how do you have a conversation?
I agree.
And action, not just conversation, but action.
Yes.
That allows for different ideas, and there are many different ideas between right and left and conservative and liberal and center, without people saying you are anti-American, you're anti-Israel, you are anti...
Criticizing a few aspects of someone or a country does not and should not translate to hatred against that individual or country. People should be taught to look for similarities and common ground between one another, instead of solely focusing on the differences, and actually have mature conversations about their shared goals, instead of accusing each other of being literal Nazis just because of a disagreement.
I completely agree. I think that you could go back. I often think of a quote of the late Jean Kirkpatrick, who said at some point that her own political evolution was in part informed by the anti-Vietnam protests. And I remember she said somewhere that the thing that pushed her towards the more conservative side on watching those protests was, she said, she had no doubt that there were flaws in America as a country, but in order for America to improve as a country, it had to survive. There seems to me to be a considerable wisdom in that, is that and this is what I sometimes describe as the difference between a critic and an enemy. It's not hard to tell the difference between a critic of your society who wants to improve your society and an enemy who wants it gone. And sometimes people say, how do you make that delineation? And I say, look, in the same way that I can tell it as an individual. If my mother tells me that what I'm wearing doesn't look great on me, I'll believe her because my mother may be a critic, but I know she wants me to do well. But if somebody clearly hates me and says they loathe my outfit, I'd be unwise to listen to their advice.
How do you think you were misunderstood?
I don't know, because I spend very little time.
I know you would say that, but I ask you to give it a moment. You know, when you read some assessment of what you do, you ever think they don't get it, or they don't understand me?
I suppose to some extent, yes. I probably one that I've.
Dunkin's $6 meal deal. 2 delicious wake-up wraps. And a medium iced or hot coffee for $6. Only at Dunkin'.
Who are you? Francis Neely, 124 West Ave, Chicago. Former Master Sergeant of the 110 Special Investigators Unit. Right now you're using that information to find out everything you can about me. Figured I'd save you the trouble. I'm a PI. You want to learn how to do this work? Look closely.
You know, I am a trained investigator. Not trained like me.
Just a friend.
Right.
Noticed is that I believe that I'm writing and defending in a tradition which is what I understand as liberal.
Not everyone who criticizes you does so because they hate you, and not everyone who criticizes you does so because they genuinely want you to do better. The person's relationship to you matters, and if they have nothing but love for you, it's not criticism, it's advice. But if the person hates you, it's not advice, it's just hatred. And the same thing applies to the people who criticize America, or any country for that matter.
Of course, liberal is a very shape-shifting term, which changes across borders, but in the true sense, a defense of liberalism, in the classical sense, that's where I feel all my instincts to be. I rub along pretty well with everyone, and so on. So occasionally I've been surprised when I see people portraying me as if I was some closed-minded to the world nativist or something like that. I haven't had that for a while, but I have had it in the past. And yes, I suppose when I've seen that, I've been rather bewildered. But I mean, it's hard to say how you might be misinterpreted when I really do think, particularly in the age of social media, it's too easy to get dragged into thinking about how people think of you. And I genuinely don't do that. My orientation in life is to say what I think is true and to maintain the good, a good impression in the eyes of the few people I respect.
I've often said you have to define yourself.
Yes, I think that's right. If you don't,
you do it by your work and your values, what you write, and as old-fashioned as it may sound, are you at core a kind person?
I believe that the people in my life would say I am. I suppose it's an unusual person who would think of themselves as unkind, but I believe so. I remember my late friend Clive James, who you must have come across over the years. Yes. He once said something that rang true with me. He said, you know, sometimes in my public writing I come across as a rather gloomy and doom-laden person, but it's odd because my experience of myself in my life is that I'm a rather jolly, happy-go-lucky kind of guy. I think I feel the same thing, actually, which is that in my life I think I'm a rather pleasant and so on person. I suppose that sometimes inevitably with some of the causes I take up and some of the arguments I'm involved in, that doesn't necessarily come out, but...
Douglas is right about this. A person's views on the world, more often than not, are not a reflection of what they're like as a person. Many times, some of the most jolly and happy people you know would have rather depressing and gloomy beliefs, whereas someone who might genuinely come across as nihilistic in person might hold some of the most optimistic and hopeful views you've ever come across.
What's the role of journalism in today's society, and how do we best serve that role?
Well, I would think it's... we're not doing well in public perception these days. Most opinion polls show journalists as being in public eye in terms of trustworthiness somewhere between politicians and household burglars, in no particular order. There's very low public trust in journalism, and I think it's because of one thing in particular, which is that the age of social media has meant that journalism is not just that mistakes can be seen, it's that journalism itself has become transparent to the public. They can see through things that they wouldn't have seen through 30 years ago. And so I believe that the role of journalism should be to tell truth, to expose truth, to expose lies, and to be able to be trusted, I suppose. That would be, because when a democracy is working well, the role of journalism is so key, as that sort of counterweight to the political class. Speaking up, I've often said also, speaking up for, you know, there's this thing in journalism where journalists love to be praised for saying what no one else will say. But I always say that also there is a great importance in the role of saying what a lot of people would love to say, but just don't have the opportunity to say. To speak for majority opinion as well as minority opinion.
Someone just sent over an interesting thought article. Hold on, I want to post that. That's really great. Everybody in class gave that a thumbs up. Yeah, I'm gonna read it. I just want to post it on my X page. Okay. Mainstream news lacks humanitarian views, primarily due to commercial pressures. Traditional news values prioritizing conflict over steady suffering and shrinking for news budgets. Outlets favor dramatic, fast-moving, or geopolitically strategic events over slow-developing human crisis. Wow, that's a huge statement. Outlets favor dramatic, fast-moving, or geopolitically strategic events over slow, developing human crises. Absolutely. The Band-Aid, yeah. I'm stuck on Band-Aid, Branco's Band-Aid. Boom, boom, boom. High cost, maintaining international.
Disrupt my life. My treat.
A lot, huh? It's so many. Just in the last, 10 minutes. This is the 4th or 5th one at least. Prescription drug ad. Wow. High cost. Maintaining international bureaus and regular on-the-ground reporting in remote areas is expensive. You just even take a small piece of that puzzle. It's maddening. Yeah. You don't want to understand almost. I'd rather not know. Bonbons. Low profitability. Humanitarian and in-depth developmental reporting attracts less advertising revenue than sensational or domestic political news. Resource cuts. Most commercial media organizations have downsized or closed foreign desks, relying instead on quick agency feeds. Editorial and cultural biases. Geopolitical alignment. Coverage usually follows foreign policy interests of wealthy interests of wealthy nations rather than sheer scale of human need. Coverage usually follows foreign policy interests of wealthy nations rather than the sheer scale of human need. And see how when we zero in on the sheer scale, it expands to all the nations. Greenhouses, basic human functioning. Did you know there's 100,000 public schools? Never mind. Perspective homogeneity. Perspective homogeneity. Mainstream reporting typically relies on official government or military sources rather than local community voices or humanitarian workers. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of tea. Yeah. A bit. It's just a bit. Yeah, sometimes when it gets really humid like that, it's my esophagus. Perspective homogeneity. Mainstream reporting typically relies on official government or military sources rather than local community voices or humanitarian workers. Whew. For dedicated coverage of these topics, readers often turn to specialized alternative like the New Humanitarian or Relief Web. Have you heard of those? New Humanitarian, NEW, or Relief Web.
But we are going to go through a wild ride on this, because as you know, I mean, the status of the mainstream in journalism is just changing all the time, and we'll probably lose some major papers in the US and other countries in the coming years, and you know, I don't know where it'll end up. All I can continue is to use my voice where I can. I'm very lucky to have that. I never underestimate the great good fortune of having a voice.
Escape the indoors with Cutter Backyard Bug Solutions. From lawn treatment that lasts all summer, or a backyard fogger for your deck or patio. And Cutter candles, perfect for summer evenings. Cutter, protect your people. Shop now.
I've said this many times before that my greatest lessons have been articulated by you. I had to learn them myself, but they were articulated by you.
What you can do is approve of yourself for living.
Approve of yourself
for being alive.
For being alive.
My belief is you never can leave home. You take it with you.
Everywhere
you go. So my past is my present.
And everything that's happened in your past is what makes you who you are right this moment.
What's up?
One of the most important lessons I ever learned from you, and that is when people show you who they are, believe them.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you know, when you know better, you do better.
That's the ticket.
That's the ticket. I recited that to myself many times. I come as one, but I stand as 10,000.
That's it.
Yeah.
You girl.
The force of that.
That's it.
The force
yes,
of that.
ma'am.
A happy hello to you. I thank you for taking the time to be with me here on the Oprah Podcast. One of my greatest mentors, mother, sister, friend in my life, Dr. Maya Angelou, passed 12 years ago. And I know you all feel this sometimes too for people who are close to you. It's still hard to believe it's been that long. Maya taught me more, I believe, than any other single human being that I knew on the planet. I learned so many life lessons from her. Things that she actually said, but also how she lived and moved through the world. I think she is one of the reasons why I have embraced aging with such enthusiasm, because she would say to me, girl, I'm telling you the 80s are hot. So I'm still waiting to experience that. I learned so many lessons from her. I could write a book about it. And I know she had the same impact on so many of you. I first met her in my early 20s. I was working in Baltimore, and I had convinced my station news director that she was worthy of being on the evening news. They didn't even know who she was. She was speaking at Morgan State University, and I asked them if I could go and cover her and create a story from it. And I met her backstage, and I said, Miss Angelou, if you would just give me 5 minutes of your time, I would really appreciate it for this interview. And she agreed, and I held my hand out. I had a little Timex watch, and I watched that clock to make sure I didn't go 1 second over the 5 minutes that she gave me. And when we were done, she turned to me and she said, who are you, girl? And I was forever taken by her. Our bond was immediate, it was profound, and I would go on to interview her countless times throughout the years. And when all of the craziness and disruption of life sometimes would creep in, I would call her, and I often go back to the lessons I learned from Maya Angelou to remind myself to get centered in who I really am. And many times when things still occur, I think, oh, what would Maya do? What would Maya be doing in this time? It's a blessing to me that I have so many of those conversations on camera. So for this podcast, I want to share some of those great lessons with you, because my intention right now is to do what Maya said in her poem to grandmother. She said, when you learn, teach. When you get, give. So my intention is to share the wisdom I've learned over the years, to offer you a breathing space, a thoughtful place beneath all the noise of the world, starting with Maya's belief in the power of words. I got this lesson many times from her.
Words are things, I'm convinced. You must be careful about the words you use, or the words you allow to be used in your house. In the Old Testament, we are told in Genesis that in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was God, and the Word was with God. That's in Genesis. Words are things. You must be careful. Careful about calling people out of their names, using racial pejoratives and sexual pejoratives and all that ignorance. Don't do that. Someday we'll be able to measure the power of words. I think they are things. I think they get on the walls. They get in your wallpaper. They get in your rugs, in your upholstery, in your clothes, and finally into you. When I was 3 and my brother 5, my mother and father separated, divorced, and neither of them wanted me and my brother. But my grandmother, my father's mother, said, send them to me. And so they sent us without adult supervision on a train with tags on our arms, saying these children are to be given to Mrs. Annie Henderson, my grandma. We actually arrived in the town. Dining car waiters and Pullman car porters took us off trains, put us on other trains, and we really arrived in this village about the size of a studio to Stamps, Arkansas. My grandmother owned the only black-owned store in the little village in which we lived. She was an amazing woman. She lent money to the white businessmen in the town during the Depression. So she taught me so much. And I look like her. And I sound like her. When I was 7, we were picked up and taken from my grandmother to my mother's people in St. Louis. My mother's people were foreign to me. All of her brothers were highfalutin, were so this and that. My brother Daley and I tried to learn and become city kids, but my mother's boyfriend raped me when I was 7. I told Bailey the name of the rapist. I wouldn't tell the adults, but I told Bailey. I said, I can't tell you because he said he will kill you. He was 9 years old. He said, I won't let him. So I told him, of course, I believed anything. He was my Black Kingdom come, Bailey. So he told the family. The man was put in jail for 1 day and night and released. And 2 huge white policemen came into my mother's house. Bailey and I were on the floor playing a game in her parlor. These huge policemen came in navy blue serge suits, and blue serge was about ½ an inch thick in the 30s, with big brass buttons. They looked like giants. And they said, the man has been found dead, and it seems he was kicked to death. I thought my voice had killed him. That was my 7-year-old logic. So I stopped talking. My mother's family and my mother did their best to woo me away from my mutism, but they didn't know what I knew. My voice could kill. So I stopped. And after a while, I think they just really got tired of the presence of this mad and sullen and silent child. So they sent me back to my grandma, to Mama. The best thing that could have happened. My grandmother, she was an amazing woman. She gave me a little tablet, a 5-cent tablet, and she took a pocket knife and cut a groove in a number 2 pencil and put a string in that groove. And then the other string she tied to the spiral of the tablet. And I kept that on my waistband. So if anybody asked me, what I thought, I would write it. Mrs. Flowers was a black lady in stamps in my neighborhood. And she knew I didn't speak. So she took me to the black school. There was a library, about 1/10 the size of my library in my home. But it seemed to me there were millions of books. And she said, I want you to read from A to CL and make notes. I was 8 years old. I read every book. I read everything. I don't say I understood that much, but I read, and I found that I loved poetry. I loved it. All of it. Just that which I understood and that which I didn't. She would come up the hill from the white school. I don't know how she had that contact, but she'd come up with books for me to read. And I loved it. I've read Paul Laurence Dunbar, James Weldon Johnson, Count P. Cullen. I memorized. I read Edgar Allan Poe. I loved Poe so much I called him Eep to myself. I read Shakespeare, and at one time I memorized like 50 sonnets or something. But I read one sonnet which made me think Shakespeare may be a black girl in the South who has been molested. How could he know when, in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone bemoan my outcast state and trouble a deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate. Shakespeare knew what it was like to be raped and scorned, you see. So of course I thought he was a black girl, barefoot in the South. It spoke to me. About 4 years after Mrs. Flowers started me to read, and really to read, I was about 12 and a half. Mrs. Flowers invited me to her house, and she used to make tea cookies and lemonade. And she'd give me that to drink, and she'd talk about poetry, and she'd read to me with this mellifluous voice. And she said, Maya, you do not like poetry. I got my tablet. I said, yes, ma'am. She wouldn't even look at my tablet. And she pointed her finger at me. And really, black people don't like to be pointed at. And she was so elegant. She knew better. She just shook her finger in my face. I ran out of her house. I ran back to my grandma. And Mrs. Flowers came back there and pointed her finger at me in front of Mama. She said, you'll never love it until you speak it. Until you feel it come across your tongue, over your teeth, through your lips. You will never love poetry. Never. And she harassed me. She kept following me around and around for months. And finally I went under the house where the chickens go. Dirt is so soft because they scratch under them. I went under that house and I tried to recite a poem. And I found I had left my voice. My voice hadn't left me. So I started talking again. And I'm not stopped. No, I think Mrs. Flowers.
And aren't we glad she didn't stop? Mm-hmm. Well, Maya Angelou is one of the world's greatest poets and authors, and she wrote more than 30 books over the course of her life. And her seminal autobiography series began with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It's considered one of the best nonfiction books of all time. It's been banned for years. I've been a student of that book since I read that very first page where she says, what you looking at me for? Didn't come to stay, only came to say, Happy Easter Day. Well, I was just floored by that sentence because I grew up in the church, just like Maya grew up in the church, raised by her grandmother. I was raised by my grandmother. And it was the first time that I'd read a book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, where a young girl's story was a mirror for my own. And I felt so validated by her story.
So when you wrote I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, was that a cleansing and a proclaiming of yourself to the world?
I don't think so. I've heard that that's what it was supposed to be.
Really?
You know, that it was supposed to be in its own way cathartic and that. I don't know about that. I didn't feel that I had doffed a particular mortal coil, you know. I felt I had tried to write the truth and write it eloquently. But I don't know, you know, that I never agreed with Thomas Wolfe's statement that you can't go home again.
Yeah.
My belief is you never can leave home. You take it with you. Everywhere you go. So my past is my present.
And everything that's happened in your past is what makes you who you are right this moment.
That's it.
When you wrote that, did you know that it would do for me and everybody else who's ever read it, particularly young black girls? I opened that book. First of all,
and readers. The stakes are so high, it seems to me, if you look at those things that we have experienced, but in terms of the things that are the four risks that I cited at the beginning, nuclear, biology, climate, and technology. I mean, lots of people worry that if the United States doesn't win the race to dominate AI, and the Chinese do, that will have consequences for us and our global leadership.
That's certainly true. The race is always on, though. That's. I sometimes console myself, and I try to console readers and people I meet when they. Some people can easily slip into catastrophism, and sometimes one should be catastrophic, but it's hard to do all the time. I always console myself by reading history, and because it's such a wonderful reminder that it was always like this, and that even in periods of what seemed to us to be relative calm in the country, the times were filled with just as many alarms and crises as our own day, as many fears, as many worries, as many plagues, and much more.
Speaking the truth does not always have to come in the form of saying things that only a minority knows to be true. Sometimes there is more bravery in saying things that the majority believes in, but just aren't brave enough to say. And now, more than ever, people need to realise that we do not live in uniquely hard times. The world has always been a messy place, but we're still here, aren't we?
So that doesn't mean that I have an attitude that is fatalistic or pessimistic, but simply that I think it's consoling to remember it's always like this. It always was like this, and that the future has never been clear. And that, as C.S. Lewis beautifully said, human life always existed on the edge of a precipice.
So, any thoughts on what Douglas Murray just discussed? Share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you never miss any of our future debates.